Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Chamber of Medford and Jackson County's virtual forum for November 2020. This webinar today is sponsored by Avista Utilities and is brought to you by our season sponsor, the Cow Creek Band of Umpqua Tribes of Indians. I'm Steve Vincent, Oregon Regional Business Manager for Avista, and will be emceeing today's program featuring our keynote speaker, Avista Corp's Jason Thaxton, who is Senior Vice President of Energy Resources and the Environmental Compliance Officer. Brad Hicks, President and CEO of the Chamber, will moderate the questions for our speaker and will close today's forum. So thank you, Jason and Brad, for being here this afternoon. Before we get started, I'd like to thank all of the forum sponsors who helped us put these programs together. Thank you for your continued support, especially during these remarkably uncertain times. The fact that you all have retained and sustained your sponsorship for the forum series, despite the obvious that we're not all in the ballroom at the country club, is really outstanding. The Chamber is grateful to be able to continue to bring everyone together on topics that are important to our business community, our region, and the Chamber appreciates you all being here today. Just as we do for every virtual forum, I'd like to remind you of how today's program will work. If you've attended one of these forums before online, you'll likely already know this information, but for those of you who are new, I'd like to explain a few things for our viewers. As you've noticed, you are not on screen and you do not have video or microphone capabilities. You're logged in as an attendee. There is a Q&A feature for this webinar. So if you take a look at the bottom of your screen, the icon Q&A is there, and there you'll be able to type in your questions for Jason, our panelist. We'll be reading through your questions and asking a few of these at the end that Brad will moderate at the end of Jason's presentation. So today's forum is Avista's 15th in a series we've continued to title Energy and the Economy. So 15 forum seasons ago, now retired CEO Scott Morris spoke about public policies and energy sector trends, really with the purpose of helping you understand how changes in the energy sector might affect your operational costs and other things that you really ought to be paying attention to. His talk came on the heels of the Enron scandal and focused on congressional policies being led by members such as then Senator Joe Lieberman and Congressman Henry Waxman. So while some of these names may seem historic, federal, state, and local public policies are even more relevant today in our delivery of utility service to you. And so Jason will talk with you about the advances we're making in resources we acquire on your behalf. And as I mentioned, so Jason Thaxton is Avista Corp Senior Vice President of Energy Resources and the Environmental Compliance Officer. He joined Avista in 1996 and has held a number of leadership positions in customer solutions, energy delivery, finance, risk management, investor relations, and corporate development. Jason holds a Bachelor's of Arts from Whitworth University, majoring in international studies and an emphasis in business management. He then earned his MBA from Gonzaga University, go Bulldogs. He served on the board of trustees, or he now serves on the board of trustees of Whitworth University, as well as on the boards of the Pacific Northwest Utilities Conference Committee, the Northwest Gas Association, the Health Sciences and Services Authority of Spokane County, which would be a lot like our Jackson County Health Department, and previously served on the boards of the YMCA of the Inland Northwest, the Northwest Business Development Association, and the Business Development Corporation of Eastern Washington. So thank you, Jason, for joining us and presenting, and I'm going to turn it over to you. Thank you, everybody.
Great, thank you, Steve. And hello to all of you. I had the pleasure of attending and presenting to this group a few years ago. I can't remember exactly when it was, but as has already been mentioned, it was much more enjoyable being able to see your faces and be in the room with you and to engage and interact in a more direct way. But this is the world that we're living in. And it's been a tough weekend, I think, for all of us. I understand. On a little lighter note, I understand that that many of you are in the camps of, if you're football fans, you're either 49ers fans or some Broncos fans probably, and I hope there are some Seahawks fans down there. And all three teams lost this weekend, so that was rough. And then on a more serious note, certainly the orders coming out of both Governor Brown's office and Governor Inslee's office in Washington State yesterday. Governor Brown's was earlier, I know, around kind of resetting some of the activities due to COVID has been difficult, and I know we're all processing what that means, especially as we head into the holidays. I am glad to be here with you virtually, and look forward to spending a few minutes just sharing some thoughts about energy and the economy. And do look forward to any questions that you might have for me that we can cover in the Q&A part of this session. And so here's the outline for our time together, the discussion agenda. I'd like to remind you of who Avista is. I know many of you have known Avista for many years, as Steve just described, but just to remind you of who we are and the areas that we operate and where we get our natural gas, since we are an electric and gas utility, but our work down in the Medford area is of course on the natural gas side of business. So just to have a discussion of that, because I think it helps set some context for how we view natural gas and the role it plays in the clean energy future, both from a natural gas perspective, but also as it relates to the electric grid and the role that natural gas plays there. And then I'd like to share some progress with you, steps that Avista is taking toward a cleaner energy future. We pride ourselves in the 130 plus years that we've been in operation of having a really strong environmental record and a good environmental footprint, but there's always more that we can do going forward toward a cleaner energy future. And so I'll share some of those thoughts with you. So first, who we are. You know that we serve natural gas, and we serve the area. You're part of your neck of the woods in Oregon. You can see here on this chart that we do have electric and natural gas business in 3 states. We actually have operations in 5 states because we also have a relatively small electric utility in southeast Alaska. And then we have some generation in the state of Montana. But you can see here on this chart, this map, the blue shaded areas are where we serve natural gas to customers. The orange areas are where we serve electricity. So you can see that's in eastern Washington and North Idaho. And then the green is where we have both electric and natural gas customers. We get our natural gas primarily from 2 areas of North America. About 2/3 of our gas comes from Canada, and about 1/3 of our gas comes from the Rocky Mountain region. And so what you see on the left side of this page here is all of those lines represent natural gas pipelines. And so you're familiar with here, in the Medford area, we benefit from having 2 pipelines that are nearby. The Williams Northwest pipeline is the blue, and then the GTN pipeline comes from the Canadian-Idaho border all the way down to the California-Oregon border. And so we're able to access 2 major pipelines coming through the Pacific Northwest. And that's nice because it gives us a diverse supply of natural gas from 2 major producing regions in Canada, north of Seattle, north of Vancouver, and then north of Montana. And then we also are able to access some cost-effective natural gas from the Rocky Mountain region, where you see that blue pipeline that goes through Idaho and into Oregon, and then down the I-5 corridor there, basically. We also have a really unique, not the only one in the Pacific Northwest, but the largest underground natural gas storage facility, which is called the Jackson Prairie Storage. It's near Centralia, Washington. And that's a picture. There's not much you can see because most of it's underground, but there's a picture on the right side of the chart there of the page of the some of the operations related to the Jackson Prairie storage facility. What's nice about that facility is that it allows us to inject natural gas into the ground when either prices are really low or in the summertime when our customers aren't using much natural gas, and then pull it out of the ground when prices are higher and when our customers are using a lot more natural gas. And so that storage facility is really important as we think about providing cost-effective natural gas to our customers, and when we think about reliability of the system. And I'll talk about that a little more. So as we've had a lot of conversations about natural gas inside the company and with customers and communities that we serve. And through those conversations and a lot of the work that we've been doing over the last several years, we have continued to refine and clarify what our view is about natural gas. And I'll talk some more in a little bit about some of the pressures that we're seeing on natural gas. I'm sure many of you are familiar with some of the movements that are out there to reduce natural gas either entirely or significantly. And so we felt at Avista it was really important for us to have a view on it. And so here are some key perspectives that we have been sharing with our employees and with customers and communities that we serve. The first is that we believe that natural gas is critical to the clean energy future. And here are some examples that in the right applications of natural gas, direct use of natural gas is the best use. So as an example, in our home, we have natural gas heat, we have natural gas heated water. And when it's super cold out, there isn't a more cost-effective resource for us to heat our home and our water that is environmentally responsible. I could go back to heating our home with wood. We've not done that, but I grew up in a home that was heated with wood, and that's certainly cost effective. But from an environmental perspective, it has quite an impact on the air quality, especially compared to natural gas. So we say in the right applications, direct use of natural gas is the best use. On the generation side, natural gas is really important, and it's critical especially to the grid, especially as we see more and more renewables coming onto our grid, until there's a time in the future, and this is probably quite a ways out, when utility scale storage is both cost effective and reliable. Today, there is electric storage, battery storage is pretty common and prevalent, but it's relatively small compared to the overall grid, and it will last for a few hours at most. For our electric customers in North Idaho and Eastern Washington, we need storage that is there for 40 plus hours, because our peak usage of electricity is about 6 p.m. on a February night when the wind may or may not be blowing. The water probably isn't flowing that much down the rivers because a lot of that water is still in the form of snow in the mountains. And the sun certainly isn't shining at that time of the day in a January or February night. And so natural gas is critical to supporting and offsetting the renewables that are on the grid to make sure that we keep the lights on. And we've also had some conversations about some of the interest that's out there to see full electrification of energy, and to see natural gas removed entirely from the energy system. And while there are some elements of that that are worthy of further discussion, the concern we have is that full electrification can lead to unintended consequences. The first is if you see a lot of customers who were using natural gas convert to electricity, it's going to take more electric generation, and reliable electric generation. And so while there may be a reduction of carbon dioxide emissions on the natural gas side, there could be a much larger increase in carbon dioxide emissions on the additional generation side that need to be taken into consideration. The other thing that unintended consequence that exists potentially is that the whole electric grid has to be beefed up. We've done the analysis on our own grid to say for our natural gas customers who are in our electric service territory, that orange overlap that I showed you on the map earlier, what would happen to our electric usage? And our estimate is that it would double. We'd see a doubling of our electric usage if all of our natural gas customers in that part of our service territory converted. And we don't have power lines and transformers and all of the infrastructure that gets the power from the generator to the home that can handle a doubling of the electric usage. And so we would see a large investment in that infrastructure, which translates to additional bill pressure. And then if I think about my own home, what would happen if somebody came to my front door and said, you can't use your natural gas anymore, you need to convert to electricity? Well, I would need to change my furnace. I would need to change my water heater and change some of the ventilation systems to handle that change. And presumably that would be borne by me. So that's not to say that electrification in the right applications makes sense, but a full-scale application or electrification effort where with the goal of removing natural gas from the whole energy ecosystem is a challenge that needs to be really thought through well. And that leads to this last point, which is really just saying that a diversified approach to energy supply that includes natural gas, we believe makes sense. And so that's kind of our overall view. And while we say that natural gas is still an important part of the energy system, and we believe that, and we also acknowledge that there's more that we can do on the natural gas side to ensure that it's as environmentally responsible as possible. And so we have been doing a lot of work on steps that we can take to reduce the carbon footprint of our natural gas business. And I'll give you these three examples. The first is around where we get our gas and what kind of natural gas we are bringing onto the system. We call this the gas supply and distribution opportunities. And the opportunity that I'm really excited about that we're pursuing at this point is renewable natural gas. You see this this blue bar with banana peel and a cow and a garbage can and a water pipe. And that's just to show some of the different renewable natural gas opportunities that exist out there. So when we have an opportunity like that, where instead of using natural gas that's produced out of the ground, we're taking a process that's already underway and repurposing some of the waste from that into a renewable natural gas, that will help the environmental footprint of the overall natural gas business. And we have a couple of projects that we're in discussions in right now and look promising, but there's a lot more work to be done to see if we can really make it work from a customer perspective. We also see opportunities by going up those pipelines that I showed you on that map and going to the producing regions and doing some work with the natural gas producers themselves and targeting some of the sourcing with suppliers who themselves are focused on reducing their greenhouse gas footprint and finding ways to produce the natural gas in ways that reduce the carbon dioxide emissions associated with that production process. And so there are opportunities to be more intentional in the producers and the conversations with the producers and contracting with those producers. And then finally, as we've done for 40 plus years, we'll continue to engage with our customers. We've done it for 130 years, but around energy efficiency, we've had energy efficiency programs with our customers for over 40 years, where we partner with our customers, and I'm sure some of you are familiar with these programs, where we work with our customers to help them conserve their energy usage or be more efficient in their energy usage. And that, of course, reduces the overall use of natural gas, which improves the carbon footprint there. But there are also opportunities around what we call demand response, where you work with the customers to find ways to help them reduce their usage in certain situations and find solutions around demand response that work both for the customers and the broader grid that the broader grid that we're working with, both on the natural gas side and the electric side. And then finally, voluntary programs. On the electric side, the example is that we've offered our customers the ability to purchase some additional renewable energy as part of their supply, so that even though we have a pretty clean portfolio of generation, they can voluntarily increase that. And we've been exploring what that looks like on the natural gas side as we pursue renewable natural gas to see if there's an opportunity for our commercial customers, for example, who would like to see more of their natural gas come from a renewable supply to participate in that. We're still working through that, but that's an opportunity that might exist as well. And some of this, just following on with the last point I was making about partnering with our customers to focus on the role that natural gas plays in their energy supply. And you see here some pictures that tie to these bullet points. So natural gas continues to be economic in the right uses. And so the picture over on the right there of the shower head just shows that, for those that have the ability to heat their water with natural gas, it is often the most cost-effective source for doing that. But it's also a clean energy source. And while I just talked to you about some ways that we want to make it even cleaner, just acknowledging, as you see in this middle graphic here, that compared to other fossil fuels, that natural gas produces 50% less carbon dioxide. So when we're thinking about all of the options around heating our homes and businesses, around generating electricity, we believe that natural gas has a role in all of that because of the environmental attributes of natural gas relative to some of the other sources that are out there. And then the comfort and convenience of natural gas. I know I sound like a salesperson here, but I know that some who cook with natural gas, as you see in that graphic below, have really appreciated that and want to continue having that as an opportunity for them. So I talked to you some about our natural gas, the work that we're doing with our natural gas business, and as it relates to the environment and affordability. And even though we don't serve you with electricity, I thought it would be helpful just to spend a few minutes talking about what we're doing on the electric side of our business as well, because it does tie into the natural gas business. And it's also maybe interesting for you, and you can explore what your utility, your electric utility, is doing around in this space as well. Last year, we established a goal to serve our customers with 100% clean electricity by 2045 and to have a carbon neutral supply of electricity by the end of 2027. And both of those are pretty aspirational goals. They do tie to some legislation that was passed in Washington State, but these are a little more aggressive than what the legislation requires. And we've made this goal for both our Washington and our Idaho electric customers. But we're already starting from a pretty good place. About 57% of our generation is clean or renewable. About half of our generation is hydro generation. We have a little bit of wind, as you see there, a little bit of solar, and then we have a biomass facility that is part of that as well. And so whenever I talk with our employees or with policymakers or the communities we serve about this goal that we've established, I always have these 4 bullet points here below included, because they're really important caveats that come with us achieving this goal. The first is that we're going to continue to focus on reliability and affordability. We're not going to get ourselves, we don't intend to and don't plan to get ourselves in a situation where we move so aggressively toward that 100% clean electricity that we risk not being able to keep the lights on. And we're not going to do that so aggressively or go toward that goal so aggressively where we would see our customers' rates go up significantly as a result. And so what that means is tied to the 3rd bullet point here, technologies and the associated costs of those technologies need to continue to mature and drop in price. And what I mean by that is, for example, with solar panels, with wind turbines, we've seen a lot of that pricing drop significantly over the last several years, but they need to continue in order for us to be able to effectively and cost effectively provide more of our generation in that form. And as I mentioned earlier, a little bit about storage on the gas side, we also have to think about on the electric side, what storage products exist, how costly they are or aren't, and how mature they are in terms of being able to store energy for a very long period of time. And so we need to see those technologies and associated costs continue to emerge and mature. And then if I talk about, I skipped over the 2nd bullet point because I want to come back to it about the role that natural gas plays in a clean energy future. And I've talked about that some, but I want to just give you an example of something that happened even recently that really highlights the importance of natural gas. Some of you may have seen a few months ago now, that California had some rolling blackouts. Now, there were a whole bunch of reasons for those rolling blackouts, and I wouldn't say there was any one reason that was the primary driver for it. There are some policy issues, and I'll talk some more about that in a minute here. broader policy implications. But I would say that one of the issues that California has been dealing with and working through and stumbling with at times is the growing percentage of renewable generation on their grid in California, and the reduction that's happening of natural gas generation and nuclear generation that's going to be coming offline in about 4 or 5 years. So what you see is a shift in the portfolio of generation from a diversified mix of generation, some which is controllable and some which is not controllable, some that have carbon dioxide emissions and some that have no carbon dioxide emissions but aren't controllable. And so that results in some interesting outcomes. And one of those outcomes was manifested a few months ago when they had the rolling blackouts, where they had some generation that wasn't available, some natural gas generation that wasn't available. And it was really hot, as it was in the whole Pacific Northwest at the time. And there was a projection that they wouldn't have enough generation online to meet the load, the usage by the customers. And part of that was because that peak in California in August happens around 5 p.m., 6 p.m. When the air conditioning is still going on full load, but the sun has been setting, or it's on its way to setting. And so all of that solar generation that's there in California is starting to drop off, and they need something to pick up. And so that's something that we can learn from in the Pacific Northwest. And a conversation I've been having regularly with policymakers is we can learn from what's happening in other parts of the country where they might be further ahead of us, and make sure that we are focusing on the reliability and implications of these decisions as much as we are about the environmental implications of these decisions. And then the final bullet point, it says it's not just about generation. As we move toward a cleaner portfolio, or a cleaner grid, 100% clean grid, we're not going to solve it with a bunch of windmills and solar panels. We're not going to solve it with just adding a bunch of storage either. There's a lot that's happening, what I call at the edge of the grid, where the traditional utility electric grid meets up with the customers. And so at Avista, and I know other utilities are doing this, but I'm really excited about the work that we're doing at Avista, where we're experimenting, we're partnering with customers. We have a university district here in Spokane where we've built a building that has its own heating plant, a district heating plant, and it's a net zero building in terms of energy consumption. And so we're experimenting with some of that and seeing how we can partner with our customers at the edge of the grid to partner in ways that help enable a cleaner grid without just putting a bunch more solar panels and wind turbines on the system. So it has to be an all of the above approach. I'm sure you've heard that phrase before when we talk about energy policy, and that applies here too as we move toward a cleaner grid. Finally, it seems appropriate, given we just got through an election and are still processing the election, to talk about policy implications and how that all plays into energy policy and decisions that we make around our natural gas and electric business, and how that impacts you, our customers. I often share this Venn diagram on the right side of this slide to talk about how a utility thinks about the supply of energy for its customers, whether it's natural gas or electricity. There are a lot of stakeholders out there in the world who are thinking about energy policy, but thinking about it primarily from one of these three circles. We have certainly our customers care about affordability of our product, and our regulators look at what our product costs and make decisions about those costs and whether they can be included on the bill or not. We have regulators who think about reliability and making sure that the lights stay on and that the gas infrastructure is safe and reliable. And then we have stakeholders who are focused primarily on the environmental attributes of the energy ecosystem and the grid, whether it's natural gas or electric. But I don't know that there are very many stakeholders who are thinking about all three of those and trying to find the balance for all three of those. And as a utility, that's the balance that we're trying to find. We're trying to make sure that we keep the lights on, we keep the gas flowing, that when you turn on that hot water or you turn on the light switch, that you get what you are expecting. So reliability is critical. We want to be, continue to be, and we believe we have been, responsible from an environmental perspective. So to the extent that we can make choices, all of the things being equal, we would certainly choose a cleaner source of energy to serve our customers than the alternatives. And we want to make sure that we continue to have affordability for our customers. We are always talking internally about understanding better what the economic impacts are of the pandemic, for example, and on customers, on the communities that we serve. And we don't want to add to that burden in any unnecessary ways. And so we think a lot about the affordability of our natural gas and our electricity, and make decisions that take that into consideration as we blend and balance this reliability issue and the environmental issue. And so that is really the context for when I'm talking with policymakers, whether it's at the federal level or the state level or at the local level. I'm trying to make sure that we're having the conversation around those three circles and where those intersect. And so when I think about what's happening with energy policy today at the federal level, well, a lot of that is kind of in flux right now while we wait for the runoff elections to happen in Georgia next, well, the month after next, in January. Because if the Senate majority stays in the Republican column, then I think that there is going to be a lot of discussion, a lot of work between the president and the House and the Senate about energy policy, but it likely will be a more balanced approach to energy policy at the federal level, because if you have a split majority between the House and the Senate. If the Democrats are able to win the runoff election in Georgia and the Democrats have a Senate majority in addition to the president and the House, then we start to see things like the Green New Deal come back into play, and we have to think through what impact that has on us more locally and regionally. At the state level, there's all kinds of regulation happening in Oregon right now and Washington State related to energy policy. And so much of my time in conversations there is really helping educate our policymakers about our business and this consideration of affordability, reliability, and environmental responsibility. And also really encouraging them to think about what unintended consequences multiple layers of legislation might create. And so part of our discussion is around, well, if we have some legislation that's been recently passed, let's make sure we understand all of the implications of that legislation before we jump into the next round of legislation or regulation. Now, I've seen that both in Oregon and in Washington, where there's excitement by legislators to move forward, and we haven't even kind of sorted through what the impacts are of the legislation that was just passed. And sometimes that can lead to unintended consequences that none of us want. And then finally, I would leave with, I think Tip O'Neill, former Speaker of the House from decades ago, was given credit for this phrase, all politics is local, but I'm sure many people have said it. And we're seeing a lot that's happening at the city and county level throughout our service territory and in other areas where they're getting more active in energy policy because of their local constituents and interests there. And so we really are paying a lot of attention and engaging, as we always have. You have people like Steve and others at Avista who spend a lot of time understanding what's happening at the more local level so that we can harmonize what's happening there with what's happening at the state and the federal level. So with that, I am at the last slide here, and then we'll open it up for some Q&A. Just wanted to reiterate that from our perspective, we really see natural gas as a clean, reliable, and affordable source of energy. And even though it is clean, reliable, and affordable, we believe that there are steps that we can take to make it even cleaner, but still focus on the affordability impacts for our customers. And then finally, as we at Avista, but also as the state and the country moves toward a cleaner energy future, it really does require an ongoing and important partnership among Avista, our customers, and the policymakers to make sure that we're making the right decisions with the intended outcomes of those policy decisions. So I appreciate your time. I wish I could see you to see if I was hitting the spot in terms of the information that would be interesting to you, and I'm happy to answer some questions now. So I'll hand it over to Brad, I believe.
Yes, Jason, thank you very much. We do have time for a few questions, and we do have a few questions. So let me start with this one. How many years out from now will Avista be able to continue to purchase renewable natural gas?
Well, the contracts can vary, and it really depends on what the interests and needs are of the renewable natural gas developers. My sense from conversations I've been in and from others in the team is that there's value on the developers end to have some certainty associated with the contract. And so that could be 10, 15, 20 years the contract could be in place if we can agree on the terms, the other material terms of the transaction. My sense is that a 1 or 2 year contract really isn't helpful from a developer perspective because they're investing significantly upfront to make that project work. And so they want to have some certainty of a revenue stream associated with it.
Gotcha. Thank you. I appreciate that. And maybe this is a good segue, a question that I actually had a couple of years ago. I was able to participate in a trade mission to Israel. And I know they are producing quite a bit of natural gas. But the issue, and you know this probably better than I do, from what I heard and what I've read, they are producing more natural gas than they can both use or export. But let's say, I know they're exporting quite a bit to Egypt right now, but let's say Israel was able to enter the international market. Any thoughts about what that would do to the market?
Well, there's been a lot of discussion over the years of liquefied natural gas, LNG, which allows natural gas to be much more portable as a result. And for a while in North America, there were projections that we would be peaking in our production capacity of natural gas in North America, Canada, and the US. And so it became very important to engage in these international discussions where potentially we could import some liquefied natural gas into the North American markets. What we've seen over the last several years is that it's actually shifted and that there's so much natural gas capacity to be produced in North America because of some changes in gas production techniques and technology over the last decade or two, that we're actually surplus natural gas similar to what you've described with Israel, and have had at times discussions with international parties about sending some of the natural gas that's produced here into international markets on ships through liquefied natural gas. So it really depends on what's happening with supply and demand regionally first before you look internationally, because if we have plentiful supplies here, then the economics of transporting the gas from Israel, for example, or from Asia are pretty problematic from a pricing perspective when you add in all the transportation costs.
Thank you. Another question related to something we don't like to talk about or think about, but it's fresh on people's minds, and that is impacts from wildfires. If blackouts have been partially caused by generation, is it possible that battery storage behind large solar systems could solve storage issues?
Yes, and I'm glad you brought up the wildfires. We of course, your region, your area was impacted heavily by the Alameda fire, and we had some fires up here in our area. And so what we saw in California with the wildfires was this preemptive, they call it preemptive shutoffs, and where they shut off customers' usage before the winds picked up, out of fear that the power lines would start fires or contribute to the wildfire situation. So in that case, having battery storage behind next to solar panels or wind farms doesn't really help, because the shutoffs were actually more about the transmission lines, and so that doesn't really help. Now the shutoff, the outages that I talked about this summer that were not related to the wildfires, but were related to the availability of generation. In that case, storage would help. And so there is a push to see more utility scale storage on the grid. The challenge is it's not very cost effective yet. They're working on it. And as more storage is developed and rolled out, presumably that scale, there's some benefit from that scale in terms of helping the price of that storage come down. But again, it's both the price of the storage that's important, that needs to drop, and the ability to extend that storage beyond a few hours to get it to hold storage and to be able to discharge that battery, for example, over multiple hours as opposed to 3 or 4 hours. So it's finding that right sweet spot of dropping prices for the storage and extending the capacity of that storage.
So kind of a follow-up, it seems like in the state of California, they overbuilt utility scale renewable generation, but the consumption doesn't match. How do you reconcile that, or how does that work?
Right, and we've seen that many times where, I'll give you an example. There are times when there is so much solar generation occurring in the state. This didn't happen too much this year, but in the past, so much occurring that they're actually generating more power than they're consuming. And so what happens is the state has to find somewhere to send that power. If they can't shut off, the line to that solar panel, they have to send it somewhere. And so what happens in the Pacific Northwest is California gives us a call. They say, hey, it's 2 p.m. I've got a bunch of surplus solar generation. Can I sell it to you? We say, well, we don't really need it, but they need to sell it. And so if you have more supply than demand, the supply and demand economics say the price is going to drop, and it's going to keep dropping until somebody buys the power. And there were times when the price went negative, where the utilities, the energy companies there said, I'll pay you to take that power. And that works really well for a utility like us, because we have a lot of hydro generation. So we say, okay, well, we'll take that power. We'll let you pay us for that power at 2 p.m. and we'll just back off our hydro generation. And then a few hours later, when the sun starts setting and they have all that usage, they're calling the Pacific Northwest back and saying, we need some power, and they're buying the power back. And so for us, we just ramp up the hydro generation that we back down a few hours later, and we sell it back to them. So they pay us to take the power, and they pay us to take the power back. And that's the solution that they've had so far to the challenge of having so much renewable generation there. And that's why, as we're talking with policymakers in the Pacific Northwest, we're reminding them of that and saying, let's be thoughtful about how we move forward so that we don't create a similar situation in the Pacific Northwest, because that's not good for customers when utilities are selling the power and paying somebody to take the power, and then a few hours later paying somebody to get some power back.
I won't editorialize about environmental policy. Steve might, but I won't.
Yeah,
I'll leave that one alone. Yeah, exactly. Well, thank you. I apologize. I'm no Patsy Smullen when it comes to live interviews, but I appreciate your willingness to not only present, but to field live questions that can be unsettling to some. So, Jason, thank you very much. And it looks like I've made it through our questions. So let me just say really quickly, Jason, thank you. Steve, thank you. And thank you to Avista. I can always count on Steve for keeping track of statistics, and it's pretty cool that Avista Utilities has been a real active supporter of Forum for 15 seasons. But I can tell you, Avista Utilities has been a very active supporter of both the Chamber and the City of Medford for generations, and we sure appreciate it. So Jason, thanks a million, and Steve, thank you too.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you bet. Okay, I'm going to get to some closing remarks here. And Steve, I'm guessing, even though you might not be giving yourself or Avista enough credit, this is the 101st season of Forum. And I can remember way back in the day, folks like Gates and Scott Morris and others hanging around Chamber forums. So I think Avista has been supporting Chamber forums for much longer than that. But any way you slice it, we appreciate it. So thanks to our speakers and our sponsors today. And Steve mentioned this at the top of the program. I just want to underscore it. It means so much more to us and to the Chamber right now, given the circumstances. It just goes to, I guess, speak to the value of this program and getting together in whatever form we can. I think it was our Chamber Treasurer and past Chair, David Wright, who said, well, we have to do something in terms of getting together, networking and exchanging important information. And we appreciate the fact that you choose the Chamber and you choose this program with which to do that. A couple of quick notes here. I want to alert folks to a Young Professionals Network, or YPN, speaker series on November 17th. And I think, maybe during this COVID age, they're letting even some of the older folks participate. I know I've been edged out of the Young Professionals group for some time, but I think anybody might be able to participate in this program put on by Mary Hamilton of Soul Canyon. And the focus is virtual teamwork. And we know that even though we're getting better at Zoom calls and Microsoft Teams and all those sorts of things, it does have an impact on corporate cultures and teamwork. So this should be pretty interesting. Check that out. A couple of other things. As you know, we had the Chamber's also 101st annual awards banquet, Excellence in Business program, scheduled right in the middle of what we didn't know it when we scheduled it, but turned out to be right in the middle of the tragic wildfires. And we thought that it was both respectful and appropriate to postpone that during that time. And so we did it. And we have the show in the can, and we still want to honor and say thank you to the award winners and all the sponsors and all the hard work that went into that program. So we thought it would be appropriate, you think of that time between, we should be thankful and grateful, I suppose, all year round, but Thanksgiving and the Christmas holidays are a time when people take stock or take inventory of all the things that they're thankful and grateful for. And in our case, we are thankful and for and grateful to our members and these award winners who step up all year round, regardless of whether it's a pandemic or wildfires, but are constantly doing good things for our community. So we have a new date for the annual dinner, December 10th at 6 p.m. And you will be receiving a new link for that program, and it promises to be, well, I thought it was funny, so maybe that's in the eyes of the beholder. But it should be a great program, and we want as many people as possible to tune in. So look for that link. You'll probably see it in social media as well as email and so on. The other thing we want your input on, we have the Chamber 2021 Economic Outlook Survey out on the street. That is in partnership with the Baker Strategy Group. We do it at the end of each calendar year. This year is so much more important probably than ever, at least over the last couple of decades, to know how all the things swirling around us right now are impacting you and your company, and hopefully will inform what we can do to help you. So please take the time to fill that out. The other thing, oh, you know what I did forget to mention, Jason, you forgot there are actually a few Rams fans in this crowd, and it might be painful to hear that after yesterday afternoon's game with the Seahawks, but I wanted to acknowledge that I have heard from a few Rams fans out there, and I am a Rams fan, so I just had to point that out. And last but not least, I want to say again, thank you, and that we will see you next month on December 12th for Forum sponsored. The program is also sponsored by our annual season sponsor, Cow Creek, and it's going to be an interesting panel discussion, kind of touching on a whole variety of ways 2020 has impacted us. So whether it's from an economic standpoint, a mental health standpoint, you name it, we're going to have a variety of experts weighing in on the impacts of 2020 and all the gems that 2020 has brought to us have impacted us. So please tune in for that. Unless I get another cue from Lydia, I think I've covered all of my bases. And again, I just want to say thanks to Jason and Steve and Avista, Cow Creek, and all of you. Again, it really warms our hearts to see all of our members continue to tune into our programs virtually. So thank you. Have a very safe Thanksgiving holiday. Wear a mask, wash your hands, sanitize. It feels like Groundhog Day. We're back to that, but let's get through this thing. Stay Southern Oregon strong, and we'll see you soon. Thank you.